Hey Ben, have you noticed a lot of the marketing that is targeted towards architects tends to be negative?
I mean, you're just talking about the stuff that we do? Yeah, no, I've noticed it as well. I think it's this natural thing where if you tell people where they're going wrong, you create a gap for yourself, essentially.
So, in today's episode, we're going to take a completely different angle and we're going to look at positive stories around architects promoting themselves and doing marketing because I think we all need some positivity in the world. And we're going to unpack this topic around why you see so many LinkedIn posts or ads towards architects which are trying to make you feel bad or inadequate, and how you can flip that and actually see all the opportunity that's out there and all the amazing architects who do a really good job at this, and you can do that as well. How does that
Yes,
sound?
this is like a kumbaya moment. Let's all come together and celebrate our greatness.
So, if you're wondering what you are watching, this is the Bowerbird show. That is bowerbird.io. We are, what are we, Ben? A platform that connects architects and designers with journalists all over the world.
In order to get their projects published. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But you and I, well, I'm a journalist by trade and you're a jack of all trades. But
Well, architect, architectural photographer, and we've been running Bowerbird now for about 10 years. We've seen something like 30,000 stories be published through the platform. We work with all sorts of publications all over the world. So our background is all around this niche around publishing, and then we unpack these sorts of topics. Now, if you do enjoy these topics and you want us to make more of these, please give this a thumbs up because that helps with the algorithm and encourages us as well.
on YouTube though, you can't just do it. You can't just do
No,
it at home. Like you can't just
no,
do
you got to
this.
you got
But
to do
that's
that on
nice too.
YouTube.
You can do that as well.
So let's start off with this idea that if you're scrolling through your feed, let's say on LinkedIn, as an architect, you may be bombarded with a lot of messages that are highlighting your inadequacies.
Yeah, I particularly love the ones. This is a classic marketing technique, but I love the ones that are like architect. You're getting something wrong. Architects. This is the mistake you continually make. And to be fair and totally transparent, we have done these posts in the past. I think it was just recently we were scrolling through and putting ourselves in the shoes of architects, and it's like, oh, you're always being told that, as you say, you're inadequate in some way.
Yeah, things like you don't know how to write descriptions, or you don't have enough leads, or you don't know how to position yourself, or you're doing this wrong, your website's wrong. And that can start to become really overwhelming and become a negative. It ends up doing the opposite of what people would like it to do. There's another way of looking at all of this, and it's looking at the things that people are doing really well, and so that you can replicate those things.
Yeah, I mean, what would be interesting maybe is to take a step back. I know you've spoken about this, that the fact that there are two different types of marketing that generally in the wider world, there's two different types of marketing that people can
Yeah.
use.
So you basically have, let's call it negative marketing and positive marketing. So, negative marketing is something which will trigger you to feel like you're missing something, or there's a gap, or it's like FOMO, the fear of missing out, or that your career is not going to be as glorious as you once hoped. And here's all the reasons why. Now,
So
people
basically,
use that all.
fear-based marketing.
It's fear-based marketing. Now, people do that all the time because it's identifying something that you can improve. The reason it works is because it triggers that emotion inside of you to go, yes, I need to do that,
Mhm.
until it gets too much. And then you're like, I can't do anything. Like, I'm struggling with enough things in the world, and it's overwhelming. So the other type of marketing is positive marketing, which is either going to be, here's examples of people who have done really well. You can replicate that. Follow these steps, and your world will be shiny, beautiful, and amazing.
Yeah.
So
So aspirational.
aspirational, there's probably two areas there too. One is practical aspiration, like here are the steps in which you want to go forward. And then there's, I might term it the luxury aspiration. And that one's interesting because that's actually what architects are typically marketing to their clients. And so that's why it's interesting seeing that the people marketing towards architects are going down the negativity route, The architects themselves are trying to market, here's a beautiful house that you and your family will live in. They're very different things. If you're an architect and you were trying to market the negativity to your clients, I don't think that would go down very well.
I'm sure it's been done, and you can sort of see how you could deliver that fear-based marketing of if you don't hire an architect, how do you know that it won't fall down around your ears, right? So and I know I have seen similar things like that in the past, but I think that the real differentiator there is that architecture is a luxury good. You will see very few luxury goods using fear as their motivator. It's almost all aspirational.
Can you imagine a watch brand trying to use fear-based marketing?
Well,
What
I mean, that might actually, it's one of the ones that might actually work. You'll miss that meeting if you don't buy,
Well, actually, watches back in the day probably were more about the accuracy of them. Like you're going into outer space, you need to make sure you've got a watch which is going to work. This could risk your
wearing. Are
life.
you wearing the space watch right now, Nick?
I am actually.
There you
I'm
go.
wearing the moon watch,
The moon watch.
which is what's triggering that thought. Whereas nowadays, watches are really about this is a beautiful thing. You desire this thing, and you want more of that. So that is a general background of these two areas of marketing. So we want to delve in to how architects are doing really well in marketing and then use a few case studies, which we actually got a good response this week.
Yeah.
We posted this on LinkedIn. We were asking for success stories, and the architecture marketing crew in the world jumped in and gave us all these amazing stories of what they've been doing. So thank you very much.
Yes, indeed. And I think one of the things that I was really interested in is what do architects already do really well? So it's almost like, again, coming back to the positivity, how are architects placed to be excellent marketers? And we kind of put together a bit of a list. So it's actually quite a long list. I think everyone should be really comforted by the fact that a lot of this stuff happens naturally within most practices.
Yeah, and maybe you just need a little bit of reinforcement to reassure you that there is an established process. You already know the process. It does work. You just need to go through with the steps and to continue doing those steps. So, why do architects have an unfair advantage, Ben?
Yeah, this idea of an unfair advantage. It means that over other people or other industries, you have an unfair advantage, which you should use. So it's not a negative term. Unfair advantage is a positive term. And I'd say the first one for me is that no other industry that I can think of in the world has such an established culture of high quality professional photography. That to me is the basis of everything. You talk about products, all of those sorts of things. Yes, they have to have photography, but there's something about the photography within architecture because every photo is naturally unique as well.
Well, the combination of high quality photography and high quality products. So let's say the building leads the photo. So the photo is capturing that. But because architecture is naturally around making something which is worth talking about, it would be much harder if you were in the business of paper, like The Office. It's
Yep.
like, you know,
Dunder Mifflin, is that
Dunder Miffler. The idea of trying to market blank paper would be really, really hard. There's not much you can change on a day to day basis. Whereas within architecture, you just naturally do something that's really cool. And everything that you make is cool. The models you make, the buildings that you make, being on site, the problems that you're solving. You have an unfair advantage here, and you have this culture of getting it photographed in some places in the world.
Yeah, obviously there are some parts of the world where there isn't such a strong culture. I think ultimately though that comes down to the economy around that photography, but we're actually seeing it evolve everywhere. I think everywhere that culture of architectural photography is growing. Awards are another extension of that. That architects generally love to enter and win awards, and that makes sense. But I think that's sort of more of a cultural thing, this idea of you get your photographs done because there's an awards program. And so those two things sort of go hand in hand.
Yeah. And then your second unfair advantage is that you have an entire world of publications who want to cover your topic and they don't charge you for it. It's not like you are paying for advertising slots. You have all of these journalists and all of these people who are working very hard to create these things to distribute to an audience who eventually becomes your customers.
And I think that one is probably, again, as far as industries go, there's not many out there that do this sort of work. Like they're essentially taking your completed product and sharing that with their entire audience and investing in writers to actually write that content, get it out there and distribute it to massive audiences. There aren't many industries where all of those things line up so perfectly.
Yeah. So you have this unfair advantage. I would say the one thing that architects, what they're missing, and I'm trying to always
You got to be
reframe this,
positive.
bing, bing, the positive. So the way that the most successful architects who are marketing themselves, they take all of that process. So I'm entering the awards, I'm getting things photographed, I've got this beautiful building. They don't just stop there. What they do is they actually use the content because they're trying to get that out to the world. And one of the ways they're doing that is they're actually doing the preparation beforehand. They're not trying to respond to journalists on the fly. They've actually put together their kit at the end of the project cycle and it's sitting there waiting for opportunity.
This is why it's an unfair advantage. Architects, better than almost anyone, understand process. They understand that you need to, come up with a concept before you start drawing and that you need to have the drawings before you start building. So you understand process. And I think the ability to just tack onto that, that is a huge unfair advantage. You're ready to go. As soon as you finish a project, you're ready to go and do the next thing.
Well, we might even see if ChatGPT can do us some magical imagery here. Pop, did that work? With the diagram, which shows the cycle of how an architectural project works. So you get a new client, you go through the design phase, then you go through the documentation phase, then you go through the building phase, and normally it stops. And the secret is to add the fourth phase, which is you're getting your marketing material from that project because that feeds back and around to getting the next project.
Honestly, I think architects get it now. Like, I just think architects are doing this stuff really well. They're at least taking that first leap of, okay, I need to get a package of content together. I need to tell the story. And, at a bare minimum, I need to put it on Instagram. We've kind of solved that problem, but there's just optimizing that end part. And again, it's process. It's doing the boring thing again and again and again, potentially, which again, architects, especially the ones who trained in large practice, know how to do the boring thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's the repetition. It's like going to the gym. The architects who are succeeding, they're going to the gym consistently when it comes to their marketing, and they're just doing this process again and again, but they always do it. And you can see it because we've watched architects over 10 years now. There's architects who jump in and out, who go, "Oh, I've got one project every now and then. I'm trying to push something, like I'm trying to get the water out of the well." The architects who are doing really well, it's just consistently. You know that every 6 months they're going to pop up in front of you and they've got another beautiful project. Over 10 years, they're still popping up in front of you.
And you
So
know what?
that's
The other thing is that the journalists get addicted to that. They know that there's something coming because I've been on that side of things. You haven't heard from someone in a couple of months, you know that there's a project about to land.
that's so true. It's kind of like because you're becoming a good source rather than being sporadic. It's similar to if you're reading a blog or you're watching YouTube, you're waiting for the next episode to come. And so you're waiting
Just
for that
like
next,
people in our audience.
you're just all waiting. And so getting that consistency is part of the secret. Mapping out your timelines when you do your projects and saying, we've got practical completion, we've got the clients moving in. Now we're going to wait a certain period of time, get it photographed, or maybe you are getting it photographed before the clients move in. Depends on the client, but you've got that consistent cycle so that you are always putting out new content into the world.
Yes. Another unfair advantage that architects have over a lot of other people is meeting deadlines and the importance of meeting deadlines. So really it's something that's so ingrained. you have a date that can't be moved, right? So the concrete pour on the foundations, like that can't be moved. The installation of windows quite often can't be moved. So understanding deadlines and just applying that to people on the other end, creating a magazine, like you have this ability to, when you are given a deadline, to work to that deadline. And I think potentially better than a lot of other industries where other people might be able to move something out a little bit. You understand if you've got a project that's being featured in a print magazine, that is the same as building a house. You have deadlines that can't be moved.
Speed of response. This is something that I've been thinking about this week as we asked for case studies. It was amazing how fast marketing experts responded to me with pre formatted case studies. They already had the content, they were just waiting for this opportunity. And then here you go, ding, ding, ding. And it got me thinking about, do architects do the same thing with journalists? And then starting to look at some of the data and between things like call outs, which we have a lot of call outs going up on Bowerbird now, and watching the success stories of the architects responding to that. The most responsive architects respond within 1 hour. That is so fast. 1 hour means that you haven't thought about your email, you haven't thought about your content because you've already done that beforehand. You're just saying, oh, I do have that. Tick, ding,
Here you go.
send. So you've got this cohort of architects who respond within 1 hour. Then you've got another group within, let's say, 4 hours. Then you've got 24 hours. So they've obviously got an email, they're responding slowly, eventually they get back to you. And then you have everybody else on the other end of that tail. The easy takeaway here is be prepared, respond really, really quickly. Like you should be treating it the same way that you treat it when a builder is calling you up in the morning and saying there's a disaster on site. You go, opportunity, tick, go.
Exactly. That's why, again, this is an unfair advantage because you are used to getting these phone calls from someone on site and you have to have everything there ready to go. If you're not able to pull that plan up and have a look at a detail and be able to answer, the concretest question, that concrete goes off, it costs many thousands of dollars. So I think that's why it's an unfair advantage. You know how to respond quickly to people and give them everything that they need. And a big part of that is that you're prepared. So yeah, I would say the ability to respond just whenever a journalist contacts you, sends you an email, phones you up, treat it like it's the builder on site. All right. Answer that question as quickly as you can and obviously be prepared. But again, you know how to do this. This is muscle memory.
The other part of being prepared is rather than thinking about your single project, I would be thinking about your portfolio because this gives you more chances to respond to opportunity. What we're watching now, especially with call outs and journalists asking for specific content, this is where you get a very rare opportunity to get into large publications like national newspapers, which we've got a call out this week talking about what was the
Uh,
phrase?
Color drenched spaces, I think it was. Color
Color
drenched.
drenched spaces,
Beautiful.
spaces,
Love it.
which
Only a
we
writer
love.
would say color drenched.
But the ability to respond to that, that's not residential, that's not interior specifically, it's a very specific type of project. So by having a portfolio of content ready, then you get to respond very quickly to those niche topics. And that's how you get into really high quality national sort of publications who are trying to cover a specific topic.
This is the expert comment thing. So we're seeing this more and more from these call outs from journalists all over the world. They're wanting expert commentary. They're not just wanting a project, they're wanting that expert comment. And I think the reason this is an unfair advantage for architects and interior designers is that most of the time you are a natural specialist. You naturally start to specialize your practice. And this could be in a broad category like residential architecture or commercial architecture, but it can also be quite niche. So you can come down to things like sustainability, affordable housing. You can also be an expert in certain materials. Probably a great one that comes to mind is Austin Maynard Architects, Andrew Maynard. If you want to know how to install a spiral staircase in a house, he knows. He knows. I don't know that they ever sell themselves as that, but there is a spiral staircase in almost every Austin Maynard project.
So the other stuff that we picked up on, and this was thank you to everybody who contributed this week on this topic, is the idea that taking a project beyond a commodity. So you think about how many residential projects go out there in the world, or how many interior projects go out into the world, and trying to figure out how you make this stand out and to make it different. And to be able to do that, you actually need to know why you are different rather than the project. And I think this is where the architects who are really succeeding, they've figured out what their niche is, they've figured out their speciality. And so when they're positioning their projects, they're trying to highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the base thing is do amazing work. And obviously, everyone who's listening to us on the Baobird YouTube channel, watching us, does amazing work. Okay. So we can say that as a base, you need to be doing amazing work.
Or you aspire to doing amazing work.
Yeah,
And you're
that
watching
too.
this because you're looking for all these success stories so that you can mimic those other architects and live up to your full potential.
Good point. But the base thing is you're producing great architecture and interiors, or interiors, I should say.
Very true. So, as we move on here and we get into these success stories, should we unpack the framework first, and so that we can understand why people are doing a really good job?
Yeah. So I think when we were looking at these different case studies, which again came to us from all of our Archi marketing friends out there on LinkedIn, we started to spot some similarities in all of these. So yeah, I think starting with breaking down the framework of what successful architects and designers are doing is a good idea.
So, this is drawing upon marketing experts such as Amy Edwards, Rachel Bernstone, and Alicia Brown. Thank you very much for contributing. This little section here in the episode, we've sort of amalgamated because we could see some patterns of best practice. And I think that first step was understanding the architect and why they're different. So we've sort of just mentioned that. Obviously, doing amazing work, it's very hard to get published if your work is sub, but there are ways of working around that. There were quite a few examples of people who had identified the niche that they want to be in, and then they start working on those sorts of projects, even if they're conceptual, and then positioning themselves as experts in a field. So rather than talking about the project, they're actually talking about why they're an expert in something. This is my thing. I'm really passionate about renovations or sustainability or modular building. There's a whole range of things that work in that.
But again, it's just understanding what you do first, the first step, understanding what's
Understanding,
unique about what you do.
understanding what you do, and then doing amazing work or being really passionate. Amazing work could be you could be researching a very particular type of building, and now you're an expert on that. The catch is you just want to make sure that aligns with your business goals.
Yeah, and that there's money in that market because otherwise you
Yes.
might be, yeah, or you have money, you're independently wealthy.
There's got to be enough people who are interested in that niche that you are positioning yourself within. Otherwise, you do all of this and it
Yeah,
just doesn't work
that's a
out as it
business
does.
question. You have to have your business sorted out first.
So the process is pretty straightforward. Like for most architects, if you were to do this over a 10-year period and just keep repeating it every 6 months, I think we know this works because we've got the case studies here to see it. So what's step one in the process?
Photographs. Again, that's your unfair advantage. You should be doing this naturally anyway. Photography, and there's lots of different price points out there for photography as well. You can find young photographers, you can find the established ones. Get your work photographed. Simple, first step.
And again, if you understand why you're different or what you do, brief your photographer so that you are incorporating that as part of the shoot. Whatever that focus is, you need images to be able to reinforce the stories that other people will tell about you. So, little tip there.
Well, and the interesting thing there is if you do have something quite niche, I mean, it's probably not so niche anymore, but environmentally sustainable design, for example, that unsexy photo of a heat pump or the installation of what do they call it when the geothermal, where you're installing something across a huge field to bring heat into a house. Those sorts of things become really important. So it's important to think about what your niche is so that you actually get those photos.
Well, an example might be lighting or natural light in your building. So, if that's a big part of your design philosophy, make sure you have images which highlight not just the light, but probably, I imagine, the family enjoying that light if this was a residential project. And I reinforcing that again and again. so that when somebody goes to your website, they are naturally being prompted to understand why you are different. If you were to turn up to a lighting specialist website and it was all dark photos, you're basically
You'd
saying
have
the
some
wrong thing.
questions. Yeah. But again, this is an unfair advantage. You know what you do. And so you make sure that your photographs putting that in the best light possible.
Then gathering the information that you already know. So you already have an amazing story. Architecture naturally has a story. Architects fall into the trap of archi speak, but ding ding, negative. But you already know how to tell a great story because all you need to do is tell the story of your clients and what they're trying to achieve and the struggles and then how you succeeded at the end. It's just a natural storytelling narrative.
Yep. Every project has that. Every project has a story to tell. And so, again, this is the unfair advantage, but also all the people that we're going to talk about after this have that same successful approach to things. They tell their story well.
Yeah. And if you understand what your niche is, just add in a few questions as you're preparing your Bower kit around that niche. So if
Mm.
your niche is natural lighting, just ask yourself a question like, how did natural lighting play a part in this design? You are now pulling out the information of your head, which you may have struggled to put into your project description, but you keep researching yourself and you suddenly now have framed that story in a way that that is different to just commodity project. Here's some pretty pictures. It is amazing project which focuses on this thing which you do uniquely well.
And then I guess the next step is tell people about it, distribute. Like that's what all these people do incredibly well, whether it's through, our friends in the Archi marketing community or through Bowerbird. It's distributing, it's getting that story out there. If you don't take that step, then your thought leadership piece on your blog is not really going to go anywhere unless you've got hundreds of thousands of followers. But even then,
Yeah, and I think the trick that I'm picking up on here is when people are going hard on their niche or their speciality. So this is different to we've talked about a unique or sexy project. There are some projects which will just run. They will jump all over the world and you'll be a superstar and you don't really have to think too much about it. It just naturally has appeal. If, however, you're using this strategy where you are trying to identify your niche, one of the ways you do that is you're reaching out to specific publications with this idea of the story that you're trying to cover. So let's say you're doing natural light again. Okay, which publications may want to cover this? Then talking to them so that they can cover a unique story. So you're
mm,
giving them something of value, probably doing an exclusive in that way. The response rate on exclusives has been very high.
mm.
We've talked about this before, but the data is you'll get a 60% increased engagement rate if you are offering exclusives. It is
Yep.
really worth
Go and
doing.
watch our episode on exclusives.
And if you do have new projects coming up, please let us know here at Bowerbird. We want more exclusives. The journalists are hungry for it. Please submit. Yes. So you've done that first step. Let's say you get the initial story out with the distribution. Then you need to really expand it because there's lots of other publications who want to cover your work. It's not about getting published once or twice. It's actually about getting the snowball effect running. That's how you really maximize it. And that's why I think last week we were talking about dusty photo syndrome, where people, they take the photos, they leave them on their hard drives and they don't do anything with them. These are the steps which you amplify what you've already done. You are so close. There are so many architects who are so close to being able to get published and really start to build up their marketing. They just miss that last step.
And I think these successful examples, or the most successful architects at marketing, they get published and then they talk about the fact that they've been published. So that goes back onto all of their socials
Mm.
saying, hey, we've been featured here. They're engaging personally as well with a lot of these editors through platforms like Instagram, which is the natural home of architects and interior designers. So it's not just getting published, it's then talking to people about that. So you then go and promote that again. And I think a lot of our friends in Archi marketing would be furiously nodding their heads to that part of things.
Yeah. So when we're talking about process, what I would do is literally grab your notepad and write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever steps you have here. Because what you've just said there is there's just one extra step. It's like, I've been published. What is the response? Not trying to figure it out on the fly. where you're going, oh, something's happening here. It's like somebody has published me. Great. Every time somebody publishes me, I want to share that post, and I'll tag Bowerbird too, because we'll reshare you and we'll promote
It's
you
true.
as well.
It's true.
So, anything else on the process front?
I think we can probably go and have a look at the examples that were sent through to us and some of our own as well. And we can sort of tap each one of those process steps as we go through it.
So you'll see these being reinforced in each one of these. So we have Anna O'Gorman. This has come in through Amy Edwards. Thank you very much, Amy.
Yes.
So Amy worked with Anna to establish her speciality. Now, what was that?
I think she was looking to grow public and affordable housing architecture, which is really interesting because in my mind, I know of Anna, and in my mind, there's this project that she did that was, I think, social housing, affordable social housing, and that's what's stuck in my mind. And so to have this sort of come back around and have Amy highlight this person, I'm like, oh, yeah, that was successful because it's in my mind that that's what Anna O'Gorman does.
Now, if we mix up any of the details of these case studies, we apologize. We're trying to memorize these and just being prompted by some short notes. But my memory of this case study was that Anna started off by herself, and I think she may have had one or two part timers. And then she was able to grow her practice up to 9 staff. So, this is an example of an architect who is really succeeding. Again, highlighting this positive story rather than all the negative stories, you can see the stark difference. Architects often fall into the trap of feeling like the world is against them, but there's lots of examples of people who do this really well. So look at the steps they've taken and then mimic that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as far as those steps go, photography for Anna's studio from day dot, I think her first project, she got it photographed, professionally photographed, and went hard with that. Gathering the information. I mean, again, this is just so basic. Like all of that information is already in an architect's head. This is why it's so powerful. And then distribution. I know Anna has used Bowerbird to distribute some of those early projects, but also just working constantly with journalists and understanding whose audiences that they wanted to get access to, I think is the important part.
Yeah, this is an example of when you have a speciality, when journalists are looking for that topic, who are they going to think of? They're going to naturally go, oh, I'm covering a story on this. If you've been doing this repetitively, so 5 or 10 years where you are known for something very specific, like you think about Jeremy from Breathe. Like if you were talking about anything around apartments or changing the models of how housing works, who are you going to think of? You're going to go straight to Jeremy, tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, can we have an interview? Again, another really huge success story where that conversation loops again and again and again. High quality work, photos, very clear niche, getting published, rinse, repeat, keep going. Second example.
Well, this is one of my favorites. And this guy has been with Bowerbird for a really long time. I've known him for a really long time. Melbourne-based architect called Anthony Martin from Martin Architects, which is MRTN for anyone following along at home. So honestly, I really think this guy is the next Glenn Murcutt, if you know what I mean. Once Anthony's at Glenn Murcutt's age, I think that his work will be at that standard. And the reason I say that is his work to me is the Australian vernacular, the new Australian vernacular. He brings a lot of influences from Japanese architecture and does a lot of rural work as well, coastal rural work. He's just one of those practices where I go, yeah, I would hire him to design my house.
Yeah, he does some of the most beautiful work, in my opinion,
Stunning.
right now in Australia. He was actually one of the first people who ever heard the idea of Bowerbird. I remember
Oh, right.
sitting down with him and pitching this story. And again, I can't remember if I pitched it very well. It probably just sounded like one of these crazy ideas that people have to create this startup and this piece of technology. But the reason Anthony comes to mind is he pops up on my feed consistently every 6 months with a stunning project.
I think it's probably more often than 6 months. Like honestly, I feel like he's got a new project coming out every 3 months or so.
Uh, And Anthony's interesting because he's covered by some of the highest status magazines and he gets covered all over the world in like he has been published so many times through Bowerbird, it's not even funny now. Like we were just looking at some stats, like hundreds of times getting published in that way. And I think it's the consistency. I think it's the consistency of the quality of the work, the consistency of getting it photographed, the consistency of the style, like that rural combined with beautiful design, and then the consistency of getting it out to the world and following up and getting out to the wider journalists out there, not just the niche around a couple print magazines.
Yep. I mean, again, you have to be doing beautiful work, but also all of this stuff feeds into each other. So I'm sure if you look back on Anthony's career and his portfolio, there'll be these moments where he would say, I imagine, that the aesthetic was sort of noticed by a lot of people, and people started to come to him and say, oh, well, we want some of that as well. And I think that's what, when you're successful at your marketing, that's what you get to do. You get to do more of the stuff you really love and really passionate about, and that's how you establish your.
One of the things that came to mind as we were talking through these different case studies is I think what Anthony has done well is he's built up this audience of people who are following along with him. So obviously his Instagram, I think he's got
26 or so.
26,000 followers now. And you might be thinking, oh, I've got to run an Instagram account, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. Another way of thinking of it is you just need enough people who are coming into contact with you on a regular basis for a long period of time. So if you could, and you don't know these people necessarily because you don't have a dashboard that just tells you what everybody's thinking about. But out there, when you're getting published, there are people who come into contact with you, they fall in love with your work. And then as you get the consistency in there, they're coming across your work again and again and again. And because architecture is such a long time frame, they're not picking up the phone when you post that first project. They're following along like the first year, the second year, and you're building up this bigger and bigger audience. And when somebody is ready, or when somebody asks you, which architect do you think is amazing? That's when they jump on board and say, oh, I'm going to pick up the phone and call the architect. So I just think it's this idea that what you're really trying to do is build up this group of people who really love what you do in a positive way.
Fans. Yeah,
Fans.
classic
Yeah.
fans. That's what you want. Another one that comes to mind in Melbourne, someone I've been involved with since before Bowerbird, I think, is In Between Architecture, which is run by John Liu. That one is really interesting to me because of the niche aspect. So they love renovations. Now, there are a lot of architects who just, who can't wait to get out of the renovation game and get into full new build projects. But In Between Architecture, they love the renovations. They love that people come to them with a building that they are in love with and they want to modernize it, make it livable. They started telling stories about, 9 red brick buildings and even just some apartments and things that they were working on. There was one that was one of those houses where things are kind of back to front. So I remember there was this one where they moved the kitchen and everything to the top floor to get more light into the living areas and then put the bedrooms down underneath. But you can see how identifying that they were really good at renovations. They were really good at dealing with, these are not heritage buildings. These are like buildings from the 80s and forward. But they loved working with that type of project where, ooh, that's my doorbell going off.
Do you have to go grab something?
No, I do not.
Okay. Ding dong.
Ding dong. Maybe that was a sign that I needed to stop talking about In Between Architecture.
No. I think what's interesting about what In Between Architecture did as well was that they established that identity early on. They chose something and then they built their website around it. They had projects around it. So we've got a
Alexa is
third.
now talking to me.
We've got a third guest on now.
Yeah, this is it's all AI now. We just have we have our AI assistant.
Yeah, I think they established that niche very early on and they invested in it early on rather than I feel like architects, they often get projects that come through the door. There's the dribs and the drabs, and then they sort of find themselves somewhere. Whereas I think they did a much better job of identifying that early, just embracing it, like even if they weren't media or marketing experts, and then literally taking the steps. This is the thing with all of this and around positive marketing is going, there are success stories, and all you need to do is step one, step 2, step 3, step 4, and trust that that will lead to a good outcome. It's the same as trusting that when you go to the gym, if you go to the gym on a regular basis, if you eat healthy, you put in the work, guess what? You will see some results over time. It's not going to happen overnight, but you can trust that it will work because there's all these examples of other people.
Yes, look to the success stories. It's not they didn't luck into it. They put in
No.
the hard yards. They turned up to the gym every day to get where they needed to be.
And it's not magic either. And it's not luck. People often confuse these things and you can have a headspace which feels like the world is against you. Whereas what they've actually done is they've just taken some pretty logical steps and continued to do them over a long period of time. And that leads you to a good outcome. So, next one.
We have another one here from our friend Rachel Bernstone, who is highlighting a practice called MDC architecture, which is Matt Delroy Carr. And this is another example of, there's an element of strategy here, that we're being strategic, but it doesn't really go much beyond what we're already talking about to get that base level. So photographing projects, but most importantly, before that, knowing what he wants to do. So Matt is really into environmentally sustainable design, and so hanging all of that activity on that element of what he wants to do is what's allowed him to really establish himself, I think, as a thought leader, to the point where I think he got published in the Fifth Estate, which is sort of, I guess it's a bit more of a news website. It's a bit more of a serious, what's happening in the world of urban design and all of that sort of stuff.
Something I noticed reading through all of these case studies from marketing consultants and experts is I think a lot of what they're doing is they're helping the architect, like guiding them through the process of setting up the basics of their marketing, and which could be overwhelming if you're trying to learn that yourself. And so it makes sense to get that extra help, go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then you get the success at the end of it. So I have been quite impressed by all of these stories of what people are doing and why you would hire somebody, especially early on in a practice, to
Mm.
help you set up the marketing because it ties into the sales. So all of the marketing is leading to that person knocking on your door and saying, "Hey, can we hire you?" And that doesn't get spoken about much within architecture in those terms.
Mm. Yeah, the interesting thing is obviously Bowerbird is there for the distribution component. That's what
Mm.
we do really well. And you can come to us and, get your projects out there. But those other steps, they can be difficult. So I think it's almost that thing of, if you can't answer these questions yourself, it's kind of like having a therapist there who's going to tell you the truth and help you develop a framework for your business, not just, distributing your projects out to the media.
Yeah, if I was to summarize it, a couple post-it notes, I would say what you're doing is you're building up an audience of people who are coming into contact with you on a regular basis. So you post photos, you get published, whether that's Instagram, whether that's via Bowerbird, but you're building that up. That I actually think that's your first step. Then you need those people to be able to do something, which is your website. And primarily they need to land on your website, see that you do match them, and then a big contact button. That's all you really need there. Like that is the step there. Call me, contact me via email. And then you can deal with the sales process once people walk through your door. But there's a two-step concept of how marketing works with architects. It doesn't have to be really more complicated than that.
No, and again, everyone is sort of well prepared to deal with these things. I think the idea of maybe a lot of people, because the sales process is so much a part of starting your practice, I'd say a lot of architects are much more comfortable with the sales process than they are with the marketing process.
Hmm.
So it's almost like you kind of know what you're doing on the sales front, or at least, acquiring new clients and getting them in the door and then convincing them once they're through the door. But yeah, the actual getting those clients to start paying attention to you, starting to build an audience, that is, until you've got some success, you don't even know whether it's possible,
Absolutely.
but it is.
We've got one more case study here from Alicia Brown with
Yeah.
architecture.
Yeah, so Melbourne-based practice. Just trying to remember, get the gist of this one, because we've been given quite a detailed case study here from Alicia.
Yes. So obviously, I think it would be the same steps, which is identifying niche, identifying like expertise, then building the content around it, probably choosing the publications to go out to, and then eventually you're getting to mass distribution again.
The thing that jumps out for me from this one is consistency. So, consistently putting this content out. Again, we've hit on this before. There's lots of content there. It's not hard. Content is not the hard bit for architects. Consistency is really hard. I think Alicia goes on to talk about campaign based promotions. And I think it might be a little complex for some of our listeners, but essentially, you have a portfolio of work. And so you should be thinking about how you can use that portfolio in lots of different ways to help send a particular message. So again, if your niche is renovations, if your niche is environmentally sustainable design, well, use your portfolio to go, well, throughout the year I'm going to talk about, this one specific thing, and then I'm going to give lots of examples of that. So, those things that are a little more complex on the strategy side, but it's really basic. You're just saying figure out what you're good at and tell that story again and again and again.
Well, an easy way of doing that too, let's say renovations, is jot down an idea once a week around something that you know about renovations. So, what is the cost difference of a renovation compared to a new build straight away? What are the challenges of a renovation? What are some of the tricks of doing a renovation well? You just keep jotting those down, especially if you can write them down, present them on your website, then incorporate that into your media kits so that you become that go-to person for that topic. You just, again, it's consistency. Just keep building that up. So then when you're going on to LinkedIn or socials, you can drop that information again and again and again and again. And you've now done your marketing. It's really that simple.
I think, maybe to sort of start to wrap this one up, the thing is you are almost always 90% of the way there. If you're getting your photography done, if you are just thinking for a minute about the stories of your projects, then you're 90% of the way there. And I think to leave on a positive note is you've got it all. Like, you guys are amazing.
Absolutely. And you can start today. You already have the content. Like every architect who's been practicing for more than 1 year probably has a project just sat there. So you can already start going through the consistency process. You just need to get in there. You need to avoid the procrastination that we all have. Like, I'm waiting for a website, or I'm not ready. It's like, you're never ready to start. Like, you just need to start something, like us jumping onto YouTube. We weren't ready when we started recording these. We
What do you
probably
mean?
still
We were
aren't ready.
perfect. We were perfect from the beginning.
But by starting and getting into those habits and doing it again and again, you just naturally will get better at this stuff. So it's figuring out, what can you do today? If you're watching this video all the way to the end, you've watched us talk for 51 minutes. Figure out, what are you going to do today to take action? Are you going to post something on Instagram? Are you going to upload a project to Bowerbird? Are you going to organize a project to be photographed? Just choose whatever it is and then just start and keep doing it. It's really that
Easy.
easy. Or you could contact a marketing expert and ask them to help you do that too.
Yeah,
So
I
there's
mean, that's the thing. If you really feel like you need that help, because quite often we say this, it's like, if you're running a practice, your time may be better spent. Literally, the dollars that come out of your time might be better spent working on the things you're already working on. But you can't ignore this. So if you do need to get someone to come in and do that marketing for you and be a specialist on that front, fantastic. I'm sure most of our friends would recommend Bowerbird as well. On top of that, especially now that we've said how great they are.
So, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. Like we said, if you've enjoyed this, please give us a thumbs up. Also, thank you to everybody who has contributed, because that's what makes these episodes possible. So if you see us asking questions on LinkedIn, please leave comments or DM us, because otherwise you're going to have to just listen to us rather than actually hearing a diverse range of stories from around the world. And I think that's it from me.
Well, I'd probably say if you see us saying anything negative about architects, then feel free to call us out on it. We want to be more positive, because there are so many good positive stories out there, and we get to see them every day, but sometimes we forget to share them. So hopefully you've enjoyed it.
Hashtag positive marketing.
Positive marketing. I like that. Let's start it.
Okay, folks, signing off.
Bye, about birders.
Bye.